Hello, I'm Maddie Hale and this is Mad World. Welcome to 2024, the year that the world goes insane. 2 billion people go to vote. The US puts itself on the brink of another civil war and we all watch it through our phones. That is, until TikTok gets banned for good. This week, Trump amps up the trolling on Biden. Golf goes to war over trans players and meet the eco-protesters going after an electric car factory. I'll be joined throughout the show to make sense of all of this by political commentator Reem Ibrahim and the Daily Express columnist Ryan-Mark Parsons. Thanks for joining me. Well, it's looking like it's official. Donald Trump will most likely be the Republican Party's nomination for the 2024 presidential election following Nikki Haley's dropout. And what does the former president do to really kickstart his campaign? He trolls Joe Biden online. Trump has become notorious for his online mockery in the last few years. And when it comes to watching his successor, Joe Biden, do his State of the Union address, he took no prisoners. Take a look at what Trump put on his Instagram page while the president was doing his much-anticipated speech.
We're going to buy American. We're going to buy America. So trade rules. Buy America has been the law since 1933. Also caps and won't even go into effect until 2025. And by the way, that law was written and the benefit expires in 2025. New electric grids that are able to weather major storms and not prevent those forest fires.
And Trump's campaign team has circulated this eerie ad warning of dire consequences for America if Biden is re-elected.
I guess I should clear my mind here a little bit.
We can all see Joe Biden's weakness. If Biden wins, can he even survive till 2029? The real question is, can we? Make America Great Again Inc. is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Biden's team has shot back with their own Gen Z-focused TikTok ads.
The state of our union is strong and getting stronger.
What's tit for tat there, guys? We're taking to social media to try and grab at least some younger constituents voting for either party. But I want to start with you, Reem. Is Donald Trump the ultimate online troll? Does he have that title?
Maybe he should be. I mean, I've got to say, I do think that the Trump's campaign seems to be a little bit more polished. Those videos seem to be edited by a TikTok expert, might I add, using trending sounds. We all know that's how you get the youths onto those votes. I mean, what's interesting about this election, and of course the numerous elections that we're seeing across this year, is that social media and digital content seem to be really taking at the forefront. And actually, in order to get those young people voting, you know, if we're looking at the UK, for example, how many people between 2019 and now can now vote? They're now over 18. Same thing with the US, and actually so many people that grew up during the pandemic and sort of went to school during the pandemic are now voters.
That
and
is
so
true.
It's going to be really
and
interesting.
And that's the TikTok generation.
Yeah.
I mean, it would make sense that they're taking to these platforms to try and reel, in the voters, but it has to be said that this is nothing new for Donald Trump. He's been trolling Joe Biden since 2015. What do you think, Ryan-Mark? Do you think he is the ultimate troll?
Yeah, I think he's the ultimate troll. And I think it's a sensible stance to have to say it's really puerile and it's really childish, but I actually kind of love it.
Yeah,
I love these two presidential candidates putting out this kind of content. I think it's great. I was looking at that video this morning when Biden was at the Union address, and I think it's on 20 million views. So it's clearly hitting that demographic of voter that are going to turn out to the ballots. And even look at the midterm elections in 2022. 18 to 24-year-olds turned out in their thousands and thousands and thousands. I mean, it was 28%, well, it was probably more than thousands, millions. 28% of voters were within that age group. And that just goes to show young people are politically charged. They're wanting to get out there and vote. And actually, that's a lot more. If you compare, so for example, someone voting for the first time, that was their first midterm election vote, compared to Gen X, to boomers, to millennials, we actually saw a higher rate of 18 to 24-year-olds turning out for the 2022 midterm elections compared to other generations. And I think that says a lot about what's going to happen in this next presidential election.
That's right.
I think it does say a lot, but unfortunately, 18 to 24-year-olds, even Gen Zers in general, and the lower half of millennials are overwhelmingly left-wing. We know that, in the UK, was it 53% of 18 to 34-year-olds believe socialism is the ideal economic system, and that was polling done by the Fraser Institute. I think what's interesting is, you're absolutely right, there are going to be huge numbers of young people that have never voted before. This year is going to be their first time voting. And actually, a lot of this social media content is really geared up to try and strategize and get those votes. But the majority of them will be voting Democrat. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how much this social media stuff actually impacts it.
Yeah.
I would quite like to see Trump and Biden do a TikTok dance-off. That would be cool.
That's what we need to see.
That would be a true fall from grace when it comes to
Yes, it would be.
I know that you guys can't speak as an American voter because we're in the UK, but you two are in Gen Z and you've grown up with this, TikTok, social media. I was probably in the transitional phase when I was starting to vote, but this is kind of the way to get these voters on. And as you said, Reem, it is, anyone your age is probably predominantly left-wing, but do you think that it's two people that would kind of understand where a Conservative Party is coming from? Is it an effective campaign tool for your generation to be able to kind of say, okay, here is the President of the United States. I think we all know that there's something going on here. He's obviously the oldest sitting president in US history. He's not, he's not doing too well in getting voters off, out of their concerns that there is, some cognitive defaults going on. But is the TikTok and Trump's trolling the effective tool to get Gen Z to be like, okay, it's not all, happiness in the socialist Democrat camp?
I think it's the best way, right? I use TikTok. I started using TikTok when it first kind of became popular. Was it just before the pandemic?
Before the pandemic, with all the dances during lockdown.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this actually is that many young people are increasingly using TikTok as a search engine over Google and another search engine. So people are actually searching on TikTok for political answers. They'll be searching.
You get a lot of information on there now. There's a lot of political commentators. Channels like this are on TikTok.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you find out so much through TikTok nowadays. And if I were a young American voter and I saw that video, perhaps not the State of the Union address video, because I didn't really see the point of that. I think that was just really very childish.
But trolling.
Yeah. But the other video Trump put out of Biden where he's slurring his words and he's forgetting what he's about to say, I think that's very effective campaigning. And I would look at that and think, absolutely, I don't want Joe Biden running to be the next president and potentially be president until 2029 if he does survive, as the video says.
I think there's also something to be said about the algorithms. TikTok, for example, is overwhelmingly left-wing. And again, this kind of comes down to demand for it. There is a huge demand for young people wanting, overly left-wing content. We could use the word woke if we want to, but a lot of it is, there is this demand for that kind of very extreme leftist perspective on many of these issues, culture war and indeed economic issues. If you go on TikTok and said, what are the causes of inflation? I guarantee the first video that will come up and say it's capitalism, it's capitalist greed. So I actually think that for most young people, if we want to win the battle of ideas, it's got to be on policy ideas and it's got to be about ideas over personalities and party politics. But unfortunately, looking at the way in which both campaigns in the US have tried to use social media, I suspect it's going to be the Democrats that do particularly well, purely due to the fact that that's the way the algorithms work.
And that's their voter. I agree with you, Reem. There is TikTok. There's an appetite for TikTok because it's obviously short form.
Yes.
I would have messages of people saying that random accounts were uploading my content of just a breakdown of what had happened in US Congress that day, and that wasn't necessarily anything opinionated content. It was just this is what happened in Congress today.
Yeah.
And so many people were writing to me saying, well, we didn't get to see this, so it was an easier way of breaking it down and uploading it on TikTok, and it wasn't even me or my company doing it. But anyway, it is interesting. We're going to see this for the rest of the year. We're going to see both parties take to social media, especially TikTok, to not only troll each other, but I guess inform the public of, what each of their policies is, along with each of their competitors and what they're doing wrong.
What I like about what Trump is doing, he's not only on TikTok, but he's transcending into now fashion.
Yes.
He's released his trainers for $399, and now Gen Z are buying his trainers. They're all sold out.
And
so
that's
I think
also
that's
free campaign material as soon as they're walking around on the street.
Exactly.
You think about
Advertising
voting for
Trump everywhere. Make America great again.
He knows how to get a product viral. He really knows how to sell out a product. We're going to move on, guys, because last week on International Women's Day, female athletes who are against trans women competing in their sports were dealt a win. Trans golfer Hailey Davidson, along with all trans women, will officially be banned from competing in the NXXT Women's League golf tournament. This is after the fact that Hailey Davidson actually won the event in January, which caused backlash for the league, especially as the tour can lead to players qualifying for the LGPA tournament. NXXT Golf CEO Stuart McKinnon revealed after deliberation that the competition would no longer allow transgender women to compete in the female league. He said, "Our revised policy is a reflection of our unwavering commitment to celebrating and protecting the achievements and opportunities of female athletes. Protected categories are a fundamental aspect of sports at all levels, and it is essential for our tour to uphold these categories for biological females, ensuring a level playing field." So how did Hailey Davidson take the news? Well, she wasn't happy, claiming the sport is still just as hard and competitive for her. She said, "You can scream at me, threaten me, throw insults at me, and even ban me, but I will always get back up and keep fighting till the very end. Hate and bigotry will never win." But Caitlyn Jenner, who is a transgender woman who plays golf, celebrated the news, tweeting, "Victory! Great news on International Women's Day, and NXXT adopts female at birth requirement." Now, this comes after the fact that another golf tournament, cricket, and even chess leagues banned transgender players from competing in female sports. Riley Gaines, a former competitive college swimmer, was a guest on Joe Rogan's podcast this week and spoke about competing against Leah Thomas.
Really what had thrusted me over the edge into no longer being willing to lie, ultimately, is he and I raced in the 200 freestyle. This is the day after he swam the 500 freestyle and won a national title, beat out Olympians, beating out American record holders, right? Keep in mind, these aren't scrubs. They're the most impressive and accomplished female swimmers this world has ever seen. And again, he beat them all by body lengths. 1 second might not sound like a lot of time, but in the sport of swimming, again, measured down to the 100th of a second, 1 second is significant. He beat the entire nation of women by almost 2 full seconds.
A lot to unpack there, guys, when it comes to the whole kind of topic about transgender athletes competing in female sports. But I want to start with obviously the latest with the golf tournament. I'll start with you, Reem. What did you think about this move from the tournament banning not only Hailey Davidson, but all transgender athletes competing?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely the right move, and I think we can have a conversation about the way in which transgender people can contribute to sports, and especially competitive sports, and not be horrible about it and not be mean about it. Hailey Davidson then coming out and calling this bigotry, I think is entirely absurd in the first instance. Hailey beat all of her competitors in January. And I think that what this shows, this is effectively the second league to the top, the best of the best in golf. And of course, we can have a conversation about the fact that men and women are biologically different. Men are stronger than women. Men can have higher stamina than women. Men can do things that women cannot due to their biology. And I think it's really important that we have that conversation. I think it's entirely misconstrued and quite dangerous actually for people like Hailey Davidson to come out and say, well, this is just bigotry. It is not bigotry. It is looking at those facts, and actually it is entirely unfair for all of those other female competitors who have worked incredibly hard to get to where they are, only to be told that they have to compete with a biological man. So I think it's a great move. I think it's fantastic. And I actually think that people like Hailey need to sort of check themselves and really realise the damage they're doing to real women.
Well, you make a good point, Reem, because I agree. Nothing needs to be done with malice or bigotry in terms of announcement. You don't need to get up and make anti-trans comments because it's not I'm not going to speak for the golf tournament, but I don't think it's meant to be anti-trans. Everyone's entitled to do exactly what they want.
It's looking at biology. And ultimately, we can have conversations about, the contribution that trans people can make and should make if they wish to into competitive sports. But the reason why we have different biological categories is because men and women are biologically different and they behave differently in sports. men are physically stronger. When it comes to golf, men will absolutely be able to beat biological women in many of these categories. So I think it's really important that we have that conversation. We can do that without being transphobic, without being nasty or mean or cruel. But actually, I think it's really important that we have these nuanced conversations. What I think is incredibly unhelpful is when people like Hailey Davidson come out and say this is bigotry. And it's not bigotry. It is looking at biology and following the facts.
What did you think, Ryan-Mark?
Well, I agree with the CEO of NXXT in saying that it's about protecting the integrity of female sports. And I also agree with Reem that you don't have to be transphobic. And I disagree with Hailey in saying that it's peddling hatred or bigotry. It's not that at all. We can have discussions in a rational and reasonable way. It doesn't have to be sensationalized. It doesn't have to be exaggerative in the way that she's describing these conversations and discussions are taking place. And I also find that what we're having now, it's important to have these talks and it's important we speak about it, but it also seems pointless because ultimately we need to examine the facts and we need to examine the fact that Hailey is a biological man competing in female sports, so there is a biological advantage that she has against the other female competitors. Now that shouldn't go unnoticed, and that has to be addressed. And I think they are making the right decision in banning anyone who is trans in competing in this golfing tournament because you are at an advantage against the other women.
And on that note, obviously we had that quote from Caitlyn Jenner, who is a former Olympian. And an avid golf player. I mean, anyone knows that if you've ever watched Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Always golfing.
Always golfing.
Always golfing. And she, obviously, an outspoken and empowering trans woman who has, you know, transitioned in such a spotlight. And she is still anti-transgender players competing in women's sports. So I guess that what does that say?
Yeah, and look, and Caitlyn Jenner isn't the only person, right? There are many other trans women who have come out and said that this is completely unfair. And that's actually why I think that these conversations are really important. It's also really important that we don't alienate trans people in this conversation because many of them agree. I actually think most people agree. Most people agree that biologically, men have advantages over women, and that is why historically we've always categorised men and women differently. Now, there are other sports where their biology doesn't always matter, and so we often have them mixed. But you cannot, for example, put a man and a woman into a boxing ring together. That's just absurd. Nobody
it's
would
just
argue
common
that.
sense, isn't it? I think ultimately it just needs to come down to common sense.
Yes.
Well, would you say, on that note, would you, Ryan-Mark, agree that there would need to be like a universal decision on all sports, college, high school, like out of that, the highest of the competitions, there needs to be a universal decision that...
I think ideally, I think this discussion and this really surpasses ideological differences. It really just comes down to common sense. A man is physiologically built in a different way to a woman. So when it comes to sports, that's why, as Reem was saying, throughout the hundreds of years, we've categorised sports, sporting events, women's sports, men's sports. I mean, there's a reason for that. So yes, if we can have it from schools, I think across the board, all kinds of events. I think there are some caveats, obviously, like chess.
Yes,
I don't necessarily see...
That was quite bizarre, I will say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get it for sports like chess, but when it comes to swimming or running or golf, where having a biological advantage clearly would matter in terms of the results of the tournament, then we need to see change taking place. Otherwise, stuff like chess is fine.
Well, we're going to move on because we've got a lot more going on. Over to Germany now, where a far-left activist group has brought the Berlin Tesla factory to a standstill. The Volcano Group is suspected of a wide-ranging arson attack against Elon Musk's electric car manufacturer, which has caused damage of up to $1 billion. The group claimed responsibility for the attack, claiming that Musk is a techno-fascist and that they aim to bring Tesla to its knees. Police in Berlin say that the group has been around since 2011, mainly targeting electrical infrastructure and commercial vehicles. Musk took to his X platform to say these are either the dumbest eco-terrorists on earth or they're puppets of those who don't have good environmental goals. Now, guys, what did you think about this? I mean, this is kind of ironic to be targeting an electric car company. Aren't they meant to be the ones kind of pushing us into the future?
It's so silly, isn't it?
Oh,
International Women's Week. Woo. No, I think what's interesting about this is that, of course, electric vehicles are much more environmentally friendly. I mean, in the UK, for example, the government is looking at banning disposable vapes based on the amount of lithium that's produced during its production. What produces a lot of lithium? Electric cars. So there are these, sort of environmental arguments there. But I think what Musk said is really interesting. Maybe it is these dark money oil companies that are actually funding these crazy eco-lunatics to try and actually show, hold on a minute, this stuff is so ridiculous, let's just allow it all together. And actually, electric vehicles are, of course, competing with diesel vehicles and with petrol vehicles. So there is a potential, I mean, it's a conspiracy theory, but one that I don't think is completely unfounded, and that's effectively what Musk was saying in his Twitter.
Yeah, what did you think, Ryan, before we jumping in, or the girls jumping in? What did you have to say?
Well, I just think it's ridiculous. It is ridiculous because Tesla are doing great things for the environment over in the US. I mean, the models Tesla S and X, they've curtailed about 340 million pounds of greenhouse emissions just in the US alone. So they're doing great things in terms of helping the environment. So if these warriors are trying to actually save the world, I think they're going about it in the wrong way by targeting Musk's factory. So I just think, I don't know what they're thinking. It's the same with Just Stop Oil. And they're turning people against the cause by being so disruptive.
And that's why with an arson attack, what could that lead to?
Well, I mean, they should be arrested.
A bushfire,
right?
Well, exactly, yeah.
They should be arrested. They can also dangerously hurt some people in the factories. I think that they should absolutely be arrested and they are criminals. But this is exactly why I think this conspiracy theory about them potentially being sort of dark money oil factory, oil company funded could actually be grounded because they are driving so many people away from the environmental cause. And actually, I think that there is an argument to be had that, in order for us to actually reduce carbon emissions, in order for us to actually develop and do great things for the environment, the best way to do that is through technological advancement. Now, people like Elon Musk are spearheading that kind of technological advancement that is seeing us reduce carbon emissions, that is seeing us actually be better for the environment. And so I think that ultimately the solution to the environment and the solution to climate change is capitalism. It is environmental change, it's technological change, and it's technological development. These people are an antithesis to the environment, and I think that they need to be arrested, first of all, for arson, but secondly, for actually doing entirely the wrong thing for their own cause.
Well, the protesters just need to rethink the way they go about protesting.
Well, yeah, that's what I'll ask you. How far is too far?
Well, I think this is obviously way too far, potentially killing. I mean, the harm they have caused is significant, but also, like as I was saying earlier, with Just Support, 4 days ago, they were arrested outside of the Royal Courts of Justice because they were gluing themselves to the road again. When people do this, when these protesters go about, this is their methodology, you're actually, as Reem was saying, you're turning people away from the environmental cause. You're actually not going to get the masses on side. You're just going to dispel people away from whatever environmental policies you're trying to peddle. And you're trying to persuade us to be on board with your way of thinking. Actually, it's doing the opposite. So I think it's really just nonsensical. Them committing arson is just absolutely insane. I'm just lost for words. I mean, I can't even speak. I'm turning into Joe Biden here because I'm just flummoxed by their way of their modus operandi. I just don't get it.
I love the whole, Just Support gluing themselves to the road again. It's sort of like, it's so common. It's
a weekly occurrence. There's something on. But, I want to jump onto the other side. I'm going to be devil's advocate here. And I'm going to say, what is the alternative? A lot of these people that are protesting, are probably in your age group. I'm making myself look 80 years old by saying that, but I'm, only just shy.
When I was your age.
But I do, because they're the most environmentally charged. They're the ones that are the most, I would say, educated. I mean, when I was that age, a teenager, early 20s, I wasn't thinking about that. So I do wonder if, if you're in one of these climate protest group and you do feel like the government's not listening, What is the alternative?
This is
I'm genuinely
virtue
wondering.
signaling. This isn't. I don't believe. I think many of them probably do believe that the world is going to end, and that if they don't change things within the next 6 months, that we're all going to be dead in 10 years. But I do think that a lot of this is virtue signaling, in the same way that many of these culture war issues, this kind of social justice warrior issue, turns out to be the way it is online. Is that many of these people want to signal to everybody else that they are good, that they are doing the right thing, that they are moral, just as though during the Black Lives Matter protests back in 2020, both in the US and in the UK, people were posting black screens on their Instagram saying, look guys, I am an anti-racist, as if you have to preemptively tell people that you are anti-racist. Exactly the same issue here. These young people, I think, are very, very misguided. Now, the solution to the environment, the solution to climate change is capitalism. It is technological advancement, and people like Elon Musk are spearheading this. And I think we should be celebrating that. These people are actually damaging the environment. They are costing these companies billions of pounds just because they seem to think that they want to be virtue signaling to their peers, showing that they are doing the right thing. But also they are damaging the environmental cause. I think we need to have a wider conversation about what actually solves climate change. What is, the actual issues in the last 20, 30 years, what has actually resulted in a reduction in carbon emissions? And that has been technological advancements. These people, these eco-warriors, these social justice, virtue signaling leftist do-gooders seem to think that they want to be virtue signaling to the rest of the people, and actually they are damaging. They're doing more damage, doing more harm to the environmental cause than good.
I agree. I think it's really hollow, and I think a lot of it is posturing. And I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier in terms of Trump and Biden. It is for social media. I think they just want to project this really lovely image to their friends and
Jumping
to their
on the
fans.
bandwagon.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't believe they necessarily all really endorse what they're saying. I think a lot of it is is a projection that they are being so mindful about the environment and really philanthropic, and it's all really lovely and it's all really fluffy and it's all really nice, and I think they're great people, but actually I don't think they are. I've met some of them. One of my friends, actually, I'm 23, he's 22, he's one of these eco-warriors, and he couldn't care less really about the environment on a private level. When we're out in Soho House and we're having a picante on the rooftop, he's telling me all kinds of things, but actually on social media, you'll see a completely different version. And I think I can't say that every single person is like that, but I think social media and the way these people like to present themselves is definitely a way. I think a lot of it is hyperbole and a lot of it is them just wanting to look really good, but actually they're not.
I mean, everyone is a hypocrite. I mean, you can't, be not wearing leather and not, a vegan, and everyone breaks the rules. But I agree with you. It's just a lot of it is. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some diehard environmentalists doing great work, great research, great things for the world. But it is a lot of show face just to say I'm involved in this, and that is social media, and that is where we're at in this time in our lives. But we're all done for that. We've got that. We're at time, guys. We've saved the world's problems. That's all from us on Mad World this week. Thanks, Reem and Ryan-Mark, and thank you for watching. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.